The problem the West has is that the jihadists, the Islamists who hate the West, are using the very blessings of the West, the civil liberties, the democracy of it, in order to subvert it and undermine it. How do you deal with that? Well, here's Douglas talking about that in a staged event. And I want to show you Douglas's words, and then I'll give you some of my thoughts on how Jewish wisdom and philosophy would encourage us to navigate this problem. Because if we don't deal with this, it's just going to get more and more problematic. Have a watch, and I'll see you on the other side.
I think one of the things that this is another difference from two sides of the pond, and we talked about this very briefly, is that people will contact me on the show and say, "Oh, you spend all your time talking about Christianity. That's all you talk about, Christianity. Why would you do that?" Because it's a call-in show, and that's what people are calling in about. First of all, it's also my background. Well, you don't talk to us about Islam at all. And I was like, well, actually, we have many times, and there are occasionally Muslim callers. There's one of them who I'm fairly sure I made cry, even though that wasn't my intent. But we address those things, and yet the thing that I keep trying to point out to people is that while I might agree that when it comes to religions worldwide, Islam might be the single most dangerous ideas and be the greatest risk worldwide, but that doesn't mean it's the greatest risk in the United States or in Texas or in Austin. Sure. And you've spoken a great deal about Islam, and I think that there are different things going on in the UK that we don't see here. I mean, Muslims in the United States, I mean, apart from the general fear that has been instilled in everybody, which I think is at least exaggerated for us, but I couldn't say that for everybody. There are Muslims in Dearborn that are, drinking and getting tattoos, and they've been their version of Islam has been poisoned, probably for the good, by the secular and perhaps even Christian culture that they're surrounded with.
I once was with a pretty devout Muslim friend, and he'd been fasting for Ramadan, and he broke the fast with me in a pub with a pint of beer. So I thought it was a happy meshing of cultures.
And so we see these changes, and granted, I don't know, and you're free to tell us what we don't know about how things are much more in conflict with regard to people trying to impose their version of Sharia law in conflict with UK laws. And
there is some of that, and some of it's exaggerated, but a lot of it is real and is there. And I mean, I give the example of the de facto blasphemy law that now exists across Europe. I mean, it's not just Charlie Hebdo. Quite a number of colleagues and friends have been shot at in recent years for blaspheming Islam, and that's in 21st century Europe, and it's something which I, at any rate, and a number of other people refuse to shut up about, because we think it's intolerable that should be the situation. And the oddity of that is that, if there were to be anyone who decided to kill Michael Palin tomorrow because of the life of Brian, I strongly urge this is not something I think should happen.
Yes.
But if that were to happen, the whole culture, everything would turn on whoever did that. There would be no ifing and butting. There'd be no kind of, well, you've got to understand the offense he caused. We'd just be saying no. And that isn't the case with this other religion in this situation, partly because people are worried about allegations of bigotry, partly because they're worried that, it's kind of punching down, and one of the motifs of the time on this, and that you might be upsetting a beleaguered minority and so on. But a third of UK Muslims polled after the Charlie Hebdo attacks said that they had some sympathy with the attackers. A third. I happen to be gay, and I'm not delighted by some of the attitudes you can still hear from churches here about homosexuality, but in my own country there was a poll in 2009 that found among British Muslims, 0% thought that you should be tolerant towards homosexuality. And a poll taken 2 years ago found that the majority of British Muslims wanted being gay to be made illegal now. So that's the sort of thing where you just start to worry. Okay, we've seen this off from one direction. What if it comes in another? And what if it benefits and gains from the fact that people are basically not primed to deal with it anymore?
There's a documentary on Netflix, because I watch tons of documentaries on Netflix, especially when I'm on the road, and it's called Welcome to Leith, and it is about a bunch of Nazis or neo-Nazis who moved to a town somewhere in, I don't know, Wyoming, Montana, someplace, and essentially tried to take it over.
Right.
And it's really eye-opening because it makes you wonder, well, what would happen if they tried to do this in my town? Now, it would take a lot of them to take over, Austin or New York or whatever, but in a small town, if you had a massive group of people show up with a particularly dangerous ideology, such that they could actually take over the city council, that they would become the dominant voting bloc.
Right.
What protections do you have?
Right.
In this case, I'm interested in we're looking at exploring this as a project. There are a number of towns that have been taken over by religious ideologies. There are towns that are almost exclusively Mormon or Hasidic Jew. And I have concerns about the constitutional rights of the individuals who live in those towns.
Sure.
Because in the states, the default is, oh, well, that, you really can't have any power, because we've got the Constitution and it's there to protect us. And as a reminder, you can in fact run for office anywhere in the United States if you're an atheist. Please stop spreading around that thing of my state constitution says you must believe. Yes, that was all settled by the Supreme Court in the 50s and then fought a couple other times as well. But you can run for office. But we had to fight it in court just to show what the Constitution says. And if they could take over a town, I get why people are terrified of that. Wouldn't it be a more practical solution? I don't know how this applies in the UK, but to just make sure that our laws are such that people can exercise their religious freedom, but they can't, there's the old joke about the Constitution, two wolves and a sheep are arguing over what's for dinner.
Sure.
And the Constitution, or the democracy, is what allows them all to vote, and the Constitution is what guarantees that the sheep's not going to be dinner.
Yeah.
And it seems that we can enforce those ideas so that people can have their preferred culture, provided it can coexist with the surroundings.
Yeah, the moment that's what we're really struggling with across Europe at the moment, is to work out where the moments are where you tread over the rights of others in a way that's unacceptable, and also then what you do about it. Because this is, it's a dialogue of the demented at the moment, where the society says, there are some things we really strongly believe in, and if you don't believe in them, well, please do. It's not very assertively made. There's a sort of, well, what happens if I don't? Well, please do. There's no follow-up.
It starts to look like war and conflict and physical violence ends up being inevitable if you can't come to a reasonable...
Yes, and some people do fear that's the case. I don't take as apocalyptic a view as that, but there's a long way for this to run, and it doesn't all go in a good direction.
So Douglas is absolutely right to raise this issue of, free ethical societies need to be able to maintain their freedoms, but also they cannot commit suicide and allow themselves to commit suicide by lending certain freedoms and liberties to people that seek to destroy it. And if we can't get a grip around this point and be able to state this plainly, then the problem just gets worse. I don't know whether it was Douglas or someone that said the West is the first society in history that seems to glorify, idolize, and allow in people who seek to destroy it. You gotta understand, it's not just allowing them in, but it's actually idolizing them, or the elite saying, well, they must have a point ultimately, and we've been so terrible to them, so, It's insane. So Jewish wisdom is very clear on these points. Number one, you do not be merciful to the cruel. Okay, it says in Kohelet, whoever is merciful to the cruel will end up being cruel to the merciful. You know, civil liberties cannot be applied equally to those who intentionally exploit them to harm innocent people. And this has to be the principle that guides democratic societies when facing extremist ideologies. Number two, Maimonides said that when someone rises to kill you, preemptive action is not only permitted but required. The Talmud says it too, but it's codified in Jewish law by the Rambam. You have to deal with people who seek your destruction. You don't just surrender or say, well, I can't do anything. That's suicide. It's wrong. You should protect your people and your society. And also, liberalism, as a principle, if it requires passivity, then in the face of evil, you've got a serious problem on your hands. In the Torah's model for foreigners living among Israel, the assumption is you have to have mutual loyalty and respect for the society's basic values. It's insane that Israel would ever consider tolerating in their midst people that will its destruction. And unfortunately, we haven't always, I think, been rigid enough in this principle, in Britain or Israel. A society is not obligated to give equal footing to people who reject its foundational norms. You can't have guests in your home that are working to destroy the host. It should be straightforward. And Judaism obviously, clearly, brought to the world, insisted to the world on the dignity of every human being, but it does not extend that to enabling evil. Rabbi Sachs said that a freer society is a moral achievement, but it must not be handed over to those who advocate violence and tyranny. And that's the point, isn't it? In a sentence, Jewish wisdom would, very much, I think, support civil liberties, but never to the point of empowering those who seek to destroy freedom, which is mercy to the cruel, and therefore leads to, in the end, cruelty to the merciful. A quick message. We all hear about the Palestinian displacement, or Nakba, of 1948. But you know, there was another, even greater displacement that we haven't been told about. Nearly 1 million Jews were expelled from Arab lands at the exact same time. Watch the trailer for our new and absolutely essential documentary called The Real Nakba. And if you want to watch the full film, just click the link below in the video description. We've all been told about the Nakba, the Palestinian catastrophe of 1948. Around 700,000 Arabs were displaced. But here's what you're rarely told. That displacement didn't come from some Jewish plan for genocide. It wasn't Israel's goal. It wasn't Israel's desire. It happened because Arab leaders launched a war of annihilation. They tried to wipe out the newborn Jewish state, vowing to drive the Jews into the sea. And in the chaos of that war, people fled. Many because their leaders told them to, promising they'd return after victory. But the term Nakba was originally used to describe the fact that the Arabs lost the war, not the displacement. Now the term describes the displacement of war used as a political weapon against Israel. But you know, there was another Nakba you haven't been told about. A catastrophe rooted not in the fog of war, but in the clear, deliberate desire for persecution and genocide. It happened at the very same time, and it led to even more displacement, yet most of the world has never heard of it. Over 850,000 Jews, more than the number of displaced Arabs, were driven from their homes across the Arab world. Communities that had thrived for millennia were uprooted overnight. Families stripped of citizenship, of property, of dignity, assaulted, expelled, forced to flee with nothing but their faith. Why? Because they were Jews. Because Israel dared to exist. Because the Arab League openly orchestrated it, drafting plans in 1947 to freeze Jewish bank accounts, seize property, and intern Jews as enemy nationals. This is the real Nakba, a catastrophe born of pure anti-Semitism. In this JTV documentary, we'll journey country by country, from Baghdad to Cairo, from Sana'a to Tripoli, uncovering buried truths and survivor voices. And no, this isn't a tale of victimhood, it's a saga of endurance, courage, and triumph. Because the Jewish people didn't just survive this Nakba, we rebuilt. We came home. In Israel, our phoenix soared from the ashes. So buckle up and let's dive in. To watch this JTV Plus documentary and access much more premium content, click on the link in the video description.